having experience in 3 very different countries, albeit all Western countries,
yes.
what were the problems you originally saw for women in science, and did they vary by country?
Well, I mean, obviously women are underrepresented from the outset, you know. I mean, on my first degree, my bachelor's degree was in informatics, and there was, in my year, I think there was about 100 people, and there was, if I remember rightly, 5 females, of which I think only about 3 of us made it to the graduation.
And how well treated were you?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I myself didn't face too many problems. Fortunately, I had a background in the field anyway, and I was achieving quite highly academically. But the other girls, I witnessed them having, quite a lot of put downs from the guys on the course. Unfortunately, there was a lot of like almost kind of sniggering, you know, oh, girls don't really do software engineering. They faced, a lot of challenges and a lot of things that would hit their confidence.
So the computational version of you throw like a girl.
Yeah.
And what did SCWIST give you? How did it help you? How did you feel when you went to a SCWIST meeting?
It was a wonderful experience, I have to say. I give a lot of credit to Ilana Brief's leadership during that time. So we formed this new board where Ilana had the vision to give each director sole responsibility on a particular area. I think before that, the directors were all working on different areas. And so I was given the task of creating the volunteer program for SCWIST. And I think working with that board, it was a very uplifting experience. Like, we worked together phenomenally well. It was really one of those situations of women, you know, lifting up other women. We inspired each other, we supported each other. It was wonderfully creative and, you know, just very inspiring. And so my first task was to go and create a volunteers committee. And again, that group of people were just wonderful to work with. You know, I won't start naming names because I'm sure I'm going to leave somebody out. But I know my successor, Julie Wong, did an amazing job taking over that committee. And we created the volunteer program, which, as far as I understand, is the basis of what is still operating now.
You planted the seeds for something that is growing strong and really blossoming. What did you learn from managing volunteers that applies to your, I did it, and I know when people can quit like that, there's no reward except the intrinsic and extrinsic. There's no financial reward, and there's nothing to tie them to a volunteer job. I found I learned so many management skills, finding and managing volunteers that apply everywhere else. Have you found that?
Absolutely, yes. It was really all about the experience and the community. And also, you know, so what we did was put at the heart of the volunteer program was the matching of a volunteer to a role that would give them something. So it was a win-win. So, you know, we would have their contribution, but in turn they would have something that would enable them to develop their skills. So maybe they were looking for a role which was just, you know, a bit outside what they were doing in their day job. Maybe it was a new career direction they were thinking of, or they were quite junior and they were looking to develop new skills and they weren't yet able to do that in their regular employment. And having a role with SCWIST enabled them to achieve those things and give them something for their own skill development, their self-esteem, and their CV. So that win-win matching of volunteer with role was absolutely crucial from the outset. And then once you've got the volunteer in the role, it's really all about recognition and community for them. So, you know, for a lot of people, I know they just really enjoyed working with the team. And then, you know, just being told thank you, and then having the volunteer recognition events where they could all get together and share experiences, that was a big thing.
You talk about sharing experiences. How important were the networking times? Before it was called networking, I did it because I like meeting interesting people, and it sounds like you do too. How important was that to your emotional well-being, and your career that you were meeting and talking to other women in science?
Yeah, that was amazing, actually, and really connecting with so many people across the volunteer sector in Vancouver, as well as within SCWIST. And I just met so many, inspiring and uplifting people who were giving their time freely, which said something about them as people to begin with. But it was just a wonderfully motivating and uplifting experience working with those people and just talking to them. And you hear of people from so many different backgrounds. Obviously, we had the Immigrating Women in Science program even back then, and people with these various backgrounds that had come to SCWIST. It was amazing to hear from them as well.
And you've been an immigrant twice in your life, it sounds like.
Yes.
So what have we accomplished? We see what the problems were. We've come a ways. What have we accomplished as women in science and tech?
I think we've come a long way, but there's still a very long way to go. And of course, now with the pandemic, we're suffering from a lot of setbacks to the progress of gender equality and women in the workplace. So I will have to assess after all of this where we're starting from after the pandemic. But I think, I think it really varies. Sometimes you sort of think, well, we're really getting there. It feels like women are advancing. And then you just hear the stories where like, oh dear, really, is that still happening in 2021? Is it possible that we can still be in the dark ages when you hear comments or something that's happened to somebody or comments that have been made?
I talked to a young man who runs an organization, and he was working from home and saying how hard it was to do with 3 small children. His wife was pregnant, trying to also work full time. They said, we have to tag team it. It's really hard, but I'm so glad because my office is opening up next week, so I can go into the office.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not see what he was saying. I imagine you can.
Yeah, of course. Yes, I totally get it. I mean, yeah, I think there is a different expectation. I know my cousin recently posted something where he was having to work from home and complaining that, he hadn't built his office with walls and the kids were making a noise, but he was sat with the headphones around his neck. And I was sort of, because my daughter, we've kept, because of COVID, we've kept her off preschool for the last year. So I've been trying to build the business and do childcare, and it's been a case of often I'm here trying to type at the computer and I've got the 4-year-old and the dog kind of clambering on me while I'm typing. So I said to him, well, if you're able to actually have headphones on and get on with your work, then you're in a pretty good position.
It's really pointed out that women cannot go out to work, cannot earn a living unless we have childcare, and being home with your child is not the same as being able to work. And I found that very early because I've usually worked from home, and we had the luxury of having someone come in to do wonderful things with a small child. But I decided to do that while I was talking to someone very important in the US, trying to negotiate rights to something, while a very small child had crawled over to a sliding door between us and was banging on it going, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy milk." And it didn't sound quite the professional. And I felt like a bad mom too. So I can see that the pandemic has pointed out some deficiencies in at least attitudes, if not realities. So
I will say, I don't know if you want to hear this, but a comparison, having come to Sweden, the comparison here compared to what I saw in the UK and in Canada, who, both of those countries are fairly advanced in this regard, but Sweden is at a whole different level when it comes to gender equality in relation to children. And it starts from the moment the baby is born. I remember, I had my daughter by cesarean section, but my husband was given a role from he was told the minute she is brought out, you've got to, rub her and you're going to take her and weigh her, and he had to wear an open shirt so she could have skin on skin time with him. He stayed in the hospital as well, so we had a room where we both stayed, so he was looking after her. And how can we expect men who are sent home night and just come in for visiting hours to understand how to take care of a newborn. So he was there throughout, and he, you know, the parental leave here is very extensive. I mean, it's like, if you share it between you, it's like a couple of years, but it is shared between the partners, and each person has to take 3 months. So the fathers at least always take 3 months minimum, and often they take much longer. So, I mean, often, you know, the mother might take the first time. I think mothers and fathers both get a certain period, so they're both home initially, and then often the father will go back simply because the mother is breastfeeding, so she stays for the first few months, and then she goes back to work, and then he is off, and then they sort of tag team a bit. That's what often happens here. But you do see, you know, you see as many men pushing prams and turning up at the school gates as women, and I haven't seen that in any other country. You know, probably the same if you go to Norway or Finland, but otherwise, yeah.
It's wonderful. Our son's 25. I was an older mom, and my husband was able to stay in the 5 days with me at BC Women's. And
That's great.
And they walked in once when I was in the shower and the baby was on his bare chest, pulling handfuls of hair with my husband's eyes wide. The baby was just in a diaper, and the nurse, the first thing she said is, "That's what we like to see." So I see the benefits of this too. And yeah, the dose of reality of caring for a very small child. But he would go to the park and be the only dad there, and sometimes the only man. So people would kind of wonder, what's a man doing here around all these small children? Whereas when it's a normal thing, everybody feels safer. And I really like that. So
you see often a couple of men pushing prams together out for the day. You know, they're both on what they call the papa ledig here, which is the sort of father leave.
And what are the things that we have yet to accomplish as women in STEM? Where would you like to see us in time? What kind of timelines do you think are realistic?
I wouldn't like to predict. I mean, it feels like we should be there already, right?
If you could snap your fingers, what would you like changed? What improvements would make a big difference? And what's the goalpost? What is that?
Well, I think, you know, first of all, the equality in the home, equality in childcare and equality in domestic work. That's a fundamental, because women cannot participate in an equal playing field at work if there isn't equality in the home. So that's got to happen. And then, of course, it is the sort of the removal of the unconscious biases. So those that are doing hiring, promoting, assessment, you know, we all have our unconscious biases, even us as women, we have them as well. So training to help people address that is helpful. And I think, you know, a lot of emphasis has been put on women in recent years, this whole lean in idea, which is really important, and we must feel empowered to be able to do that. But there's a new movement now which is saying, well, maybe it's not just on the woman to lean in, it should be on the, you know, the workplace to make it possible. So I think, you know, just all of the initiatives that are going on to help with that are essential. And then, of course, it also comes back to, you know, what SCWIST has always done with the Miss Infinity program in promoting these career paths to girls, letting them know that this is not just a career path for boys. This can be open to them and they can do well.
We know a young woman who's in her early 30s from a very traditional culture. She's a qualified registered nurse who's always wanted to be a doctor. And we've said, apply, go in. She said, no, I'm 33. I want to get married and have babies. And if I don't do that right now, do you have any words of hope that there is life after 33? There is a family after 33?
Yeah, absolutely. I have my daughter at 48. So I see a lot of these things on some of the mothers forums on Facebook, and where people in their 30s or, you know, even their like 20s are sort of, oh, it's too late. And I, you know, I remember that pressure. I remember feeling like that and having sort of with the 40th birthday approaching, thinking, well, family's not happening for me then. But, you know, I guess I'm a good example of the fact that it's it's not necessarily too late. I mean, it might not be advisable to plan to leave it that late, to be fair. There is a biological reality there, and you should be informed about that and know the facts and do what you can. But having a family doesn't mean the end of you and your career. There is life after baby as well. And I think everybody should have the freedom to pursue whichever path they want to take. And I would say, don't, a bit like the Lean In movement, Sheryl Sandberg says, don't leave before you leave. Like, there's so many women that are sort of like, well, I'm not going to take that move to that other location or that promotion because I might have a child, and deal with that when it's happening. Take the opportunities that are offered to you if they're right for you, if they fit with your what feels right to you. Take it, do it. At the point where you're going to have a baby, then make the decisions related to that situation then. But don't let that future possibility prevent you taking something that could be great now.
And for women in STEM, I imagine you see a great reason for hope. What gives you hope?
If I think back to my work with SCWIST and meeting so many women and younger women during that time, they're just firstly so highly educated, so inspiring as people, so self-motivated, so driven. The women that I worked with during that time and that were part of our community in that time, I feel like there should be no stopping them because they had all the attributes, both professional and personal, to go a long way. And so you can only hope that the environments that they land in allow them to achieve their potential, and that if there are any barriers, they manage to overcome them, and that they're given the right community and tools to empower them to overcome any barriers.
I love that one of the main tools that women can draw on is SCWIST. I loved your analogy that it's, or your statement that it's women lifting up women. And Dr. Linda Lanyon, thank you for this time.
Thank you so much.